Hi, good evening, folks. This video is meant as a rallying cry to everybody in the sense that what I'm getting from people who've reached out to me is that there are a number of you that, for whatever reason, and I'm not really trying to pass judgment necessarily because I know that people's lives are uncertain and, certainly difficult. In fact, the only thing that or aspect of our lives that is certain at the moment, and actually really ever is uncertainty, unless you go with Marvin Gaye, only three things for sure: taxes, death, and trouble. This I know. So, in any case, but there is a great deal of very well founded concern with a number of people who've reached out to me that people aren't participating in the discussion boards, and so therefore, the crafting of a research question is difficult when there isn't more participation. The advice that I'm giving is for those groups who have a lack of participation to forge ahead, and if the individuals who are not participating do participate later on, that those individuals basically need to fold into the work that's already been done, right? As I actually mentioned this in one comment on an essay last week. What most employers are actually looking for, studies show that the number one aspect that employers are looking for in an employee is the ability to show up on time, right? To show up on time or early. And of course, if you're a part of military culture, you know that 15 minutes early is actually on time, right? I'm not expecting everyone to be abreast of that or practiced in that. But anyway, you should be courteous to the other folks in your group and begin to participate if you haven't. But don't be surprised or offended if you do start participating in your group and you realize that they've already formulated a research question and so on, right? Because if this is Thursday of week 2 and this is your first time participating in the discussion board or specifically in the discussion of a research question, obviously you've got to be willing to plug in where you are. Now there are two groups right now that don't have 4; they have 3 because we've had at least one individual, I believe, dropped the class, and then one person dropped before the semester began. So in that case, you all are you only have 3 members, and then when peer editing comes up, one of you will actually be asked to peer edit more than one essay. Now, here's where all this factors to one's advantage, right? And here's where someone else's snafu, if you will, or lack of participation, etc., is not going to influence your grade. Okay? Number one, each person with the annotated bibliography, as I've said in my annotated bibliography videos and such, is responsible for 10 sources based on a specific aspect of the research question or research topic that you ultimately choose, right? So if you only, first of all, each aspect of that topic is going to be slightly specialized, so not all the sources are going to overlap anyway. However, if all you have, say, is 20 sources rather than 40 for your source pool, right? That's okay. That's going to be more than enough. Like for your argument essay, the use of 4 to 5 sources in total for the size of the essays that we're doing here, that's fine. That's going to be fine. So I wouldn't worry so much there. Now, as far as peer editing and such, I am not okay scoring you on and I haven't made any videos on this subject yet, so or specific, rather I should say, or specific to this section this semester yet. But I'm not scoring you on peer editing itself, right? There's not going to be any item to turn in for peer editing. The peer editing will be done either on the discussion board or through some other means that you all devise, i.e., video chat, email, whatever you all devise. What I'm assessing, what I'm looking at, where I'm evaluating the effort, right, is where I'm evaluating the effort every week, which is the reflections. So what I'm expecting you to do is to reflect very specifically, within very much detail and so forth, on that peer editing experience when we get to it, right? So if, for example, you peer edit 2 pieces instead of 1, you've got a lot of material upon which to reflect. You can have a very robust reflection. Okay, so that's to your advantage. Plus, I read about that, and in that clock's in the back of my mind, and so that ultimately is to your advantage down the line and as we move forward. Now, if you're in a situation where you're not having a whole lot of group participation and so forth, that too you can write about in your weekly reflection. Okay, and I totally encourage you to do that, and I totally encourage you to get those feelings out, right? And so to reiterate, right, the reflections must be minimum of 2 pages essay, right? If you submit, say I had one individual submit less than a page, that I counted as an incomplete because that was nowhere near what I was asking for. Okay, and I give you a lot of leeway on what an incomplete is and so on and so forth. I really try to err in your favor with that regard. Okay, however, that's just blatant, right? So I did count one person's as incomplete. Now, as far as what a late is technically 48 hours after the initial due date. If you email me and let me know that you're having submission problems and so forth, even if you turn it in after that, I will still count that as late if you have emailed me within that 48 hours, even if you submit it later on. Okay, I am. I don't want to be that kind of asshole. I'm quite sure that people in my life think I'm all sorts of kinds of asshole, but I don't want to be that asshole, right? So if you email me and let me know, hey, I'm having submission problems, and you submit the work a couple days later, I'll still count that as late. I'm not going to count that as missing. And a missing, that really starts to cut at your grade, right? A late, you can get up to 4. You can get a combination of up to 4 lates and incompletes, a combination of 4, and still get an A, right? So a couple of lates is not going to kill your grade, or 1 incomplete and late and so on, right? 2 missings and you've lost a letter grade, okay? Two missing, after 2 missings, you've lost a letter grade. Anything you don't turn in, if you miss 1 of anything, that's a letter grade, right? So you've got to make sure you're turning in everything every week. Okay, that's essential. That's essential. Okay, but if for example, you're having to work really late, or there's technical issues, different things. If you let me know within that 48 hours after it's due, I will still count it late. Now, if you let me know like the day before, right, it's due, say you let me know Saturday during the day or Friday evening that, hey, I'm having like submission issues, or I've got this going on, chances are I'm not even going to count it late, right? If I know what's going on and you have communicated to me, right, what's going on with you, to me, that is also effort. Okay, that is also effort, and I will take that into account. Okay, uh, then the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm having different devices beep at me, right? Uh, so that's something to keep in mind. However, and I cannot, going back to my original discussion, I cannot overemphasize this enough. It's one thing to leave me hanging a little bit. It's quite another to leave your group members hanging. That I cannot abide by. That's extremely disrespectful, and that is not that's not being respectful of someone else's time and energy, and so that, at the very least, what I am recommending that you do is sometime on each Monday, right? During the 24 hours on a Monday, right? Go into the discussion board, check in with your group, and say, look, you know, this is what I've got going on this week. This is when I'm available, so on and so forth. Or if you're not checking in on the discussion board, email your group. Check in with your group on a Monday, so that your group knows, hey, this is where this person is this week. And if you're expected to peer edit, make those arrangements. If you're expected to do something with regard to research, make those arrangements. But be courteous to the other individuals who are to some degree relying on you. Now, as I've just explained, your grade is not contingent upon what somebody else does, right? And that can all be borne out in the reflective essays, right? Okay, I hope that that's been some clarification for everybody. And, again, please reach out. I really appreciate those of you that have been in communication with me via text and so forth. I try to respond quickly in most cases. Tomorrow is Juneteenth. It's a very important day for Texas and for the South in general. It's the actual Emancipation Day, Liberation Day of African American enslaved African Americans, and even for those of us who are not of African descent. It's important because any of the liberation movements that came out of African, because by extension, you go to Juneteenth, and then you go to the various civil rights movements, particularly in the 1950s and 60s. But the liberation movements that came for say brown individuals, right, Filipinos and Latinx individuals, and Asian individuals, LGBTQ plus individuals, particularly in my case, you can't see, right? But for those of you that have worked with me in person, you know that I use a wheelchair. So the disability, the disabled rights movement, and so forth, all of that would not have been possible without the momentum and the consciousness raising, to use kind of a cliche term, of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. But that really, the foundation of a lot of things that come out of that came from, right, are in Juneteenth, and also the subsequent passage of the 13th and 14th Amendments and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. And those are documents, right? Those are that we're still trying to live up to today. And so, I encourage you to participate in in any kind of Juneteenth remembrance, if you will. Even for those of us who are Caucasian, arguably, if anybody in our society is oppressed, we're all oppressed, right? I mean, to some degree. And so, you know, again, tomorrow's a very important day. Arguably, some people argue it should be a federal holiday. President Matson has actually, it was from the chancellor of A&M, has said that it can be a half day for individuals who work on campus. But anyway, again, reach out to me if need be, and hopefully this video has clarified some stuff. All right, thanks a whole lot. Take care of yourself.